Hey Roger, what should I be doing now to set myself up to rock retirement within the next 5 years? I get that question all the time, so I decided to make a free guide to give you actions you can take to set yourself up to rock retirement. And you can check it out at DoRetirementRight.com. Do you want to have the confidence to truly rock retirement? Well, I'm going to show you how on the Retirement Answer Man Show. Well, hey there. Welcome to the show. My name is Roger Whitney. I am your host, and I am excited that you are here with me. We have an interesting show today. It's going to be a little bit different. I work really hard to make sure every show has a point. Makes sense, right? I want this show to be something that is actionable for you, whether it's a little baby step you can take or a smart sprint you can work on, rather than just me pontificating on retirement planning. That's not that useful. I want you to be able to do things. Today's show is going to be more my thoughts and observations on the retirement planning scene. So it's going to be a little bit more like a shotgun approach. I want to talk about some nuggets and some observations that I've had from talking with some of you listeners, talking to people in the Rock Retirement Club, in my retirement planning practice. And I think each one of these could be a full-blown topic. So there may be one or two. So I guess the point for the show for you is, let's just take a survey of retirement planning, and there might be one or two things that are something you need to hear right now, and it fits the timing of where you're at in your journey, and that's something you need to take and expand for yourself. And the other ones you can just toss away. So I'm in the middle of planning for 2022, and usually that starts, and I think I mentioned it, I got my big wall calendar a few weeks ago, and I just put it on the wall. And this is a calendar. It's 6 feet long, 4 feet tall, has all the months, all the days. Once it's hung up there, before I put anything on it, I'll literally spend time just looking at it, imagining what's going to happen in those periods of time, and also thinking through what I want to try to intentionally do in those periods of time. When I hang this huge calendar, I have to take off the old one, and it's all marked up. It's a dry erase type calendar. It's all marked up. So I look at the things that I had planned, whether it was a trip I was going to do or a theme I was going to do on the show or a meetup for the podcast, like the RRC open house we're having on the 16th, where we're just going to get together and chat about what the Rock Retirement Club is, how it might serve you, so you can determine whether this is something that's worth your time or not. You can check that out at livewithroger.com. I think there's over 150 people right now that are going to hang out, and I'm just going to answer questions about the club, explain what it does and what it doesn't do, so you can check that out. But anyway, when I'm taking this calendar off, there are a lot of things that we did. But there's also a lot of things that we plan to do, trips and themes that just sort of didn't happen. We changed, and that's okay. It's the intention that's the purpose, right? Now, one thing I know is going to happen in January of 2022, so it's just a month and a half away, is Retirement Plan Live, which is our listener case study where we select a listener, and the listener and I work together and talk through the journey of creating a retirement framework to help answer the questions, can I retire? How much can I spend? Will we be okay? What should I be focused on? And you get to listen in the journey and also see the big results, webinar, I guess we'll call it, where we go through the analysis. So we're going to be doing that in January again. So look for a form in 6 Shot Saturday coming up here in the next few weeks, where we're going to ask people to raise their hand and say, yeah, I'd be interested in talking about doing that. And you can put in your name and your email and answer some questions, and then we'll select a listener to be the subject of this case study. And we always change their name and some of the information to try to keep them anonymous. So look forward to that. So let's start with some nuggets, some thoughts on the retirement planning scene. I guess the first observation was I was really surprised at the Rodeo Roundup, the conference we had with retirees, how popular the subject of overcoming frugality was. I think I mentioned this before. That was like a very popular topic to talk about. And I know I've dealt with that in my practice of helping people give themselves permission that it's okay to do what they want to do. I didn't realize it was so prevalent, though, in people that are getting near retirement. If you step back, though, it makes sense, doesn't it? Having the ability to spend money on something that's important to you is really a consequence. Now, we think of consequences as bad, but if you have saved and invested in delayed gratification for decades, and now you're near or in retirement, the consequence of all those little decisions and the compounding of those decisions are, hey, maybe you can buy that lake house if you want to. Maybe you can spend money on a first-class ticket if you want to. It's a consequence. That is true, but the hard part with that consequence is not feeling comfortable to actually do it, right? Because there's a lot of gratification in delayed gratification. I know I get a lot of gratification in it when I put money into our profit sharing, or when I put money towards the future or pay down some debt. Yeah, that's delayed gratification, right? Because that money will grow for me, but it does something for me right now. It makes me feel good. When we're used to that, the people that have done a lot of that delayed gratification get a lot of gratification out of doing that. So if you're suddenly losing your income and told that, no, go ahead and spend it all right now, YOLO, well, that doesn't feel that comfortable. You don't just turn a light switch. And it doesn't mean you have to get over it to spend money, but it's something that you have to acknowledge. Yeah, this is a blind spot for me that I have to work through to find my path on. It doesn't just mean suck it up and spend money. It's a journey, like most things. I think a big part of that journey is having a retirement framework to see whether things are okay or not, give you context for that decision making. And I also think part of that journey is becoming a new version of yourself as you wind down full-time work. But anyway, overcoming frugality is a big deal. The second thing I want to talk about is retirement planning is really complicated. There's a lot of it depends as an answer. And that's important to understand, because if you don't understand it depends is really the answer to most everything, and you're looking for someone who knows the answer, you're probably going to end up getting sold something, because there's plenty of people that will say, I know exactly how to do things. And if you go down that path, you're going to get yourself, if not in trouble, not on a sustainable path where you feel like you have some control and some confidence. And so because it's always an it depends type of answer, it's important that we organize these retirement discussions in a way that makes sense. And so for me, I think of 3 pillars of retirement planning, and we're going to lean into this going forward because I think it's helpful. I know it is for me. Pillar 1 is feasible. What life do I want, and is it feasible given my resources? That's a big pillar. What do I want, and is it feasible given what I have to work with? We need to know that. So a lot of retirement planning has to, and this should be the start. What do I want to do, and is it feasible? And if we know it's feasible, it doesn't mean that it's guaranteed. We just know that, hey, this is possible, given a lot of assumptions. So that's pillar number 1. And there's a lot of planning that can happen there. Figuring out your values, figuring out what you really want once you get over frugality and learn to dream a little bit, and then putting numbers to those dreams, and then looking at what your resources are, negotiating with your spouse if you're married, etc. There's a lot that goes under this umbrella or this pillar number 1. The second pillar is, now that we have a feasible plan that's focused on what you actually care about, is how do you make it resilient? Yes, you have to have a feasible plan, but you better have a resilient plan, because the winds are going to come. It could be inflation. It could be medical expenses. It could be death. It could be markets going down. It could be tax changes that impact everybody. It could be a lot of things. There's going to be storms, and there's going to be, if not storms, just crosswinds that are going to toss you about on your journey. So you want to have resilient. You want to have resilience so you can stay the course and manage through all this weather that's going to come from a planning standpoint. And that's going to be about cash flow planning, how you're going to fund these dreams, matching your assets to when you need to fund these streams, identifying the risks that are out there, and thinking through them in an organized way to try to mitigate them or manage them. That's going to be the second pillar, which is resilience, making your plan resilient, feasible and resilient. The third pillar is optimization or optimize. This is enhancing the journey. Now that we know where we want to go, we know that it's a feasible journey. We've put in the radar and the first aid kit and everything to make the journey more resilient. Now, how do we optimize it? This is enhancing the journey. Tax planning, asset allocation, cash management, investment selection, Roth conversions, ACA credits, Medicare. You can go on down the list. And we have a list, by the way. Anything that you're dealing with within financial planning for retirement, in my opinion, needs to go under one of these three pillars. And the reason they do is because if you don't have them in one of these pillars, it's easy to let the tail wag the dog. Let's use an example. Let's say you're really, really concerned about healthcare tax credits prior to Medicare, right? They can be substantial, thousands of dollars a month potentially. And if you're so focused on this, getting ACA tax credits for healthcare to lower your healthcare costs, say, in the next 3 years until you hit Medicare, that can cause you to change your withdrawal strategy, to change your asset allocation. It can cause you to change a lot of things under the feasible and resilient pillar in order to solve for ACA tax credits in this case, which are really the optimized pillar. So you can, what's the phrase, cut off your nose to spite your face. You can focus on something that really isn't going to impact your life in a meaningful way so much that you miss something that could have a major impact on your life for years. As an example, let's say you decide not to draw money out of pre-tax accounts during your under 65 years because you want to get those credits, but then you have a substantial amount of pre-tax assets that are growing and growing and growing and are going to cause a large RMD, required minimum distribution, for the rest of your life starting at age 72. And you get the bird in the hand, you get your tax credits for the years where you don't take the money out. So it feels good today. But then all of a sudden, you have all these required minimum distributions that are much larger than they could have been, which can run you up the tax bracket code because you have all this income you have to realize you don't have a choice about it later in life. So you go up the tax brackets really quickly, which throws you into Medicare surcharges. And these things can happen for decades. You don't want the tail to wag the dog. So you better make sure that you don't let something in the optimized category dictate what happens in your life. So I think feasible, resilient, and optimize are really important to make sure that you are focused on the right things. Now it's time to answer a few of your questions. If you have a question for the show, by the way, you can go to rogerwhitney.com/Ask Roger, and you can submit an audio or a written question, and we would love to try to answer it. Now, our first question comes from Marlon on modified adjusted gross income and capital gains.
Hey, Roger. This is Marlon Jack. Love your show. I just listened to your podcast with Andy on tax management. My question is specific to realizing or harvesting losses in a brokerage account and how they affect modified adjustable gross income, if at all. Thank you so much.
Hey, Marlon, when you're calculating modified adjusted gross income, there's a couple steps that you have to take. Step one is calculating your gross income, which is basically everything that you've earned during the year. That's going to include wages and retirement income, rental income, dividends, and capital gains. So a capital gain is the amount that you profit from selling an asset, like a stock. You buy it at $1, you sell it at $10, you have a $9 capital gain. There's a tax on that. That's a preferential tax, at least at the moment. And so that gets calculated into this gross income number. Now, from there, you go to adjusted gross income, which is your gross income factoring back in certain tax deductible expenses like a health savings account contribution, health insurance premium, etc. And then from there, you go to modified adjusted gross income, where you add back in other items for like IRA contributions, losses from partnerships, etc. And so capital gains will be in that hierarchy of those three steps, but it's at the gross income level. So if you have $100,000 in realized capital gains, that's going to be part of that gross income number. Now, when it comes to capital gains, you can offset gains with losses fully. So if you have 100,000 in gains, so you sold the stock and you made 100 grand, good for you. You can sell another stock that you lost 100 grand in and offset those, and you'll have zero capital gains for the year. Now, if you have more losses realized than gains, you're limited, severely limited on how much you can realize as a capital loss. And you're limited to $3,000 per year. So when you're calculating your gross income, and let's say you had a bad year and you have realized losses of $100,000 and no gains that you offset it with, you can take a capital loss in that year's tax return of $3,000, and that other $97,000 in losses can just carry over into future years. So in the next year, if you happen to have a great year and you have $50,000 in gains realized, you can use that tax loss carryover to help offset that, which will change your adjusted or your gross income, which will help change your modified gross income. So hopefully that helps you, Marlon. Our next question comes from Janet. And actually, Janet has a little bit of criticism for me. So I just thought I'd share it. And we responded to her individually. Janet says, I've listened to your show for a while and have gleaned some useful information from it, but I have to be honest with you. I'm taking a break for a while and have unsubscribed and wonder if other middle-class individuals have done the same, following what I interpreted as your description of lower income relating to anyone who is eligible to make Roth contributions or something like that. I know you walked back the comment quickly and it didn't come out the way you intended, but I do wonder if it was a Freudian slip if you intended audience is truly targeted at the quote-unquote wealthy. I was not as enthusiastic about the podcast after the episode, although my interpretation may have been a misinterpretation. I can receive that. Now, she talks about the people that we try to target. And I don't really try to target anyone, although we do talk specifically to someone, I'll say that's within 5 years either side of leaving full-time work and retiring. So I guess that's a target. Now, from an income standpoint, we try to talk about how do you think through issues that you might face. Now, this specific instance that she mentions, I don't recall. This show is not scripted at all. The way that we produce this content here, in case you're wondering, is usually if we have a theme, it's because I'm re-exploring that specific topic for myself. So it's a little selfish that way, right? If I'm going to do a theme on long-term care, it's because I want to think through that in an organized way, and I want to do it with you. And having your input and feedback and your questions makes us all a lot better at thinking through an issue and poking around at it in different ways. I think that's really helpful. I think having, walk with the wise and become wise, I'm a big believer in. And we have some really smart people that listen to the show and share their input and share their questions. Now, because it's not scripted, if I've happened to be talking to someone who made a lot of money and then made it relative to that person. But I don't try to necessarily talk to the wealthy. I try to talk to people that are trying to be very intentional about rocking retirement. And I'm sorry if I offended you, Janet. Now, to our next question, and this is from Otto, and it's actually observation and a little bit of a criticism again on one of my answers. Otto says, I'm one of your many fans and sing your praises to anyone interested in retirement. Thank you so much. Love the philosophy, the emphasis on lifestyle and agility. So I was surprised when you endorsed an annuity for a 77-year-old woman who asked about it. I believe she already had some pension and Social Security. You mentioned that $300,000 would spin off roughly $2,000 a year. My question, why should she not at least consider in my opinion, simply living off the $300,000. More flexibility, great emergency fund. If she plays it conservative and preserve the $300 in cash, those $300 would last her 12 and a half years, which would put her about, what was that, 99? No, 89? I get it. She may live past 89, but if I were her, I'd rather take my chances and leave some cash to my heirs if I died prematurely and have the full cash amount available for my slow-go years and live it up, and having the bundle of cash for emergencies and worry about the good fortune of leaving beyond 89 or later. Thanks for the great shows, Otto says, and for making my own retirement better in so many ways. Otto, I think your approach is perfectly reasonable. I would challenge your phrasing of that I endorse the annuity for this lady. If I recall the question, I did not go back and listen to it. I think it is perfectly reasonable if someone wants to guarantee outcomes from a safety first approach to have Social Security plus the pension and use these monies to give a guaranteed income source that she can never outlive. And the benefits of that would be not just not outliving it, but then ease of management, less susceptible to financial fraud, less difficulty in the whole thing. I think that was the point that I was trying to make. But I think your approach is perfectly reasonable as well. Some of this will depend on, one, does she have heirs? Two, does she have other monies? I definitely would not suggest that someone put all of their money or the majority of their money in these types of irrevocable instruments. So I think what I was trying to do in answering that question was to think through, would this be reasonable? And in certain cases, it would be because of the ease of management and the safety that it provides. You know, one thing that we miss if you have, say, $300,000 sitting in the bank and then you live off of it, which I think is a perfectly reasonable approach, is there's what's the phrase? There's a risk that that money can be frittered away and spent unintentionally. Emergencies that are quote unquote emergencies that might not be emergencies. I know in one case I have a few clients where there's a little bit of a hazard of there's always a need that the children have, and without some restraints in place or boundaries in place, they would give almost all of their money to their kids because there's always an emergency that they have. So I think there are pros and cons of both, but I think you do make an excellent point and that it's reasonable. Thanks, buddy. Now let's go to the SMART Sprint.
On your marks, get set.
And we're off to set a little baby step you can take in the next 7 days to not just rock retirement, but rock life. So in the next 7 days, I want you to just think about something that you need to undo, something you need to say no to that maybe you said yes to. Like me going to 2 days a week and then pivoting to go back. It can be really hard. It can be a sense of pride. It can be maybe a little bit of a difficult conversation or two, but this is your life and your life is today. And it's okay for you to change your mind to create the life that you want. So just noodle on that and think if there's anything that you need to make an adjustment to that maybe you've been avoiding for a while. All right, next week is Thanksgiving. No doubt we'll have some Thanksgiving cheer and try to get Nicole on the show because she always has a thankful spirit, as I know you do. I am thankful for you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Hey, it's time for that all-important disclaimer. We so appreciate you listening to the show and love your questions and love the teaching that we're able to provide here. And actually, it helps us too. But remember, you're not our clients.
Not love it if you took advice from us on the show.
We would not love it if you took advice from us on the show. Realize this is helpful in education. Talk to your legal advisor, your tax advisor, or your financial advisor before you make any decisions.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.